What up, gamers? Today we're going to cover the new sword meta in Destiny 2. Now I wanted to wait on this video because by now the majority of players in Destiny 2 should have reached the level 30 mark within the season pass, which grants you this amazing sword called Falling Guillotine. And when I say amazing, that's also an understatement given just how powerful this sword becomes when you factor in the god roll and mods that you can stack up with it. Essentially, if you played Destiny 1, you'll likely associate this sword as the Darkdrinker 2.0, given that Darkdrinker was an exotic sword back in D1. But regardless, this sword is a must-have in your arsenal and overall a very powerful weapon to utilize within Destiny 2. And not just because it's also bugged with a timed payload after a heavy attack on an enemy. Even without this bug, this is a very powerful sword and will likely be our prime heavy for any close encounter bosses. Now when you unlock the Falling Guillotine, it already comes with a decent roll of Enduring Blade, Heavy Guard, Energy Transfer, and Whirlwind Blade. But although good, this is nowhere near the god roll for this sword. The god roll for Falling Guillotine is Jagged Edge, Swordmaster's Guard, Relentless Strikes, and Whirlwind Blade, and I'm here to explain why. First we'll go over the blade edges. Since I've rolled a ton of these swords already, I was able to test out each of them to provide you with the precise damage increases from each blade perk. So as you can see on the table, the Falling Guillotine can roll with 5 different edges, each with their own pros and cons. Excluding Honed Edge, Hungry Edge, and Tempered Edge, which provide nothing but positive traits in damage, ammo, or both to your sword. But regardless of ammo reduction, Jagged Edge will still be your best option because it offers up the most damage compared to the other edges. Yes, you do lose out on minus 20 ammo, but as long as you're combining the mods Sword Finder, Sword Reserves, and Sword Scavenger, ammo shouldn't be an issue for you. But given that the difference in damage for each edge is mere single digits percentages wise, Jagged, Honed, and Tempered will be your ideal edges to roll on any sword. Next perk to take into consideration is your sword's guard. With the Falling Guillotine sword, your main focus is the charge rate of your heavy swing. The faster you can acquire your heavy strike, the more DPS you can output on your target. So when accounting for DPS on targets, especially bosses, charge rate becomes an important factor. And since you won't be blocking very much, if not at all, with your sword, at least when dealing damage to a boss, the Swordmaster's Guard will be the best option as it reduces the charge rate by 8% from its base. Which is only 0.3 seconds difference, but in a fight with a boss, especially during timed DPS phases, that 0.3 seconds can be very important. And I'll tell you how you can make that even faster here in a bit. The charge rate also ties into your next perk choice. Tireless Blade and Relentless Strikes are going to be the go-to perks in this slot as they grant ammo just by striking the enemy or killing an enemy with a heavy attack. Relentless Strikes though is going to give you way more bang for your buck given that you'll be able to proc it more often with just light strikes on a target. Tireless Blade requires a powered sword kill to even grant that ammo back to you, which is not going to be all that useful when taking down a beefy major or boss within Destiny 2. The last perk, Energy Transfer, which came to us last season, is a great perk, but it's not useful when utilizing a sword for damage against a boss. This perk is really only viable with Heavy Guard and the Titan Stronghold Gauntlets, where blocking offers back healing from the gauntlets and Energy Transfer offers back ability energy. But for damage and steady DPS, Relentless Strikes is the way to go for this slot. The last damage perks that the Falling Guillotine offers up is Surrounded, Whirlwind Blade, Counterattack, and Unguard. Counterattack and Unguard are really more PvP perks as they last an extremely short amount of time but require non-damaging actions to proc. Surrounded is great in PvE, but you have to be surrounded by 3 or more enemies to be granted the damage buff. And in boss battles, you're not really going to have that in the majority of encounters, which is why Whirlwind Blade is by far the best perk to have in this last slot. Whirlwind Blade states that rapid sword strikes increase this weapon's damage for a short duration. The perk only lasts 3 seconds after the first strike, but given that you're consistently striking with light strikes before your heavy attack, it's a very easy perk to proc and maintain during a DPS phase. How much damage does it actually do? Well, let me just showcase you the numbers. So at base, my guillotine does 12,363 damage to a boss with a light strike. Since Whirlwind Blade comes in 5 stages, after the first strike that damage will boost up 6% from its base. And in the second strike, damage will boost up once again to 11%. If you get all 5 stages to proc after 5 light attacks, you will max out at an increase of 23% in your damage. So the optimal way to take on any boss with this god roll would be to strike the boss 5 times with your light attack, and then on your 6th strike you should be using your heavy attack to implement the max amount of damage on the boss. So you can see now how all these perks work cohesively with one another to do the max DPS. But wait, there is more, because you can actually push the sword even further with the right mods attached. One mod you should always have on a heavy for PvE is the boss spec mod. This mod alone will grant the sword an additional 7% in increased damage. And yes, it does get better than this. There's also a great mod that came to us this season known as Lucent Blade that you can acquire from the Procaster near the Drifter in the tower. This mod is by far a must-have for the sword meta, and this is for two reasons. Not only does this mod substantially increase the damage output of your sword when charged with light, but you can also reduce the charge rate substantially for your heavy attack. So what it states is that while charged with light, dealing damage with a sword gives you a bonus sword damage for 5 seconds, consuming 1 stack of charged with light. Plus, as long as you run an arc mod on your armor alongside Lucent Blade, this grants a greatly increased charge rate for your equipped swords. When this mod procs, you gain an increase in damage of 26% for the next 5 seconds, and if you activate the secondary perk, you reduce the charge rate of the heavy strike by a substantial 28%. So with Swordmaster's Guard, you can reduce that charge rate from its base of 4.05 seconds down to 3.17 seconds. And therein lies all the data you need to know for the God Roll, Falling Guillotine, and other swords in Destiny 2. With this God Roll, plus boss spec, plus Lucent Blade, and all the mods for maintaining ammo I mentioned, this will allow you to maximize your DPS on bosses within Destiny 2. Tie that in with the damage buffs and debuffs we spoke of in the last video, and you can absolutely melt through bosses as either a fire team or even solo. Also, don't downgrade the new Tempest Hook sword either, as this is also a very good sword introduced during this season of arrivals as well. Overall, I'm having a ton of fun utilizing swords this season again, and I just wanted to share with y'all how you can maximize your damage output on any target within the game, especially the bosses. But that's it for today. Hope you all have an amazing weekend, and as usual, if you enjoyed the content, drop this video a like and tap fire subscribe for more on Destiny 2. Until next time, gamers, this is Sir Mav, signing off.